Hello, and welcome to another video where we explore the history and myths of the world. Take a seat, lean back, and enjoy the video. There are wars that last for years, and then there are wars that become legends. Nearly 1800 years ago, China stood as one of the greatest empires on earth. For almost 4 centuries, the Han Dynasty had brought peace, prosperity, and stability to millions. Its influence stretched across mountains, rivers, and fertile plains, binding an enormous land beneath a single emperor. To those living within its borders, it must have seemed as though the Han would last forever. Roads connected distant provinces. Merchants carried silk, iron, and precious goods across the empire. Scholars filled libraries with knowledge. Farmers cultivated fields that fed millions. From the outside, China appeared stronger than ever. But history rarely announces the moment an empire begins to fall. It starts quietly, hidden beneath celebrations, buried beneath prosperity, unnoticed by the people who believe tomorrow will look just like today. While ordinary families carried on with their daily lives, corruption spread through the imperial court. Ambitious officials competed for power. The emperor's authority weakened with every passing year. And beneath the surface, the foundations of one of history's greatest empires were beginning to crack. And then, in 184, everything changed. In the year 184 AD, the anger that had been building for decades finally erupted. Across northern China, millions of desperate farmers rose against the Han Dynasty. They were not generals. They were not professional soldiers. They were ordinary people who believed the empire had abandoned them. History would remember them as the Yellow Turbans. Their name came from the yellow cloth wrapped around their heads, symbolizing their belief that a new age was coming. Their message spread quickly. The Han Dynasty had lost the mandate of heaven, and another power would rise to replace it. The Han court reacted quickly. Imperial armies were sent to crush the rebellion. But the government discovered a dangerous truth. The empire no longer had enough strength to solve its own problems. To survive, it had to rely on powerful regional commanders. The rebellion was eventually defeated, but the victory came too late. The Yellow Turbans had exposed the weakness of the Han Dynasty. The emperor still wore the crown, but real power was beginning to move into the hands of generals. Men who commanded armies, men who controlled territory, men who would soon fight for something greater than survival. They would fight for China itself. Among these men was someone different, a strategist, a politician, a warrior, a man who understood that chaos was not just a disaster. It was an opportunity. His name was Cao Cao. In the final years of the Han Dynasty, countless men saw the empire falling apart. But while others saw destruction, one man saw possibility. He was not born a king. He was not the strongest warrior. He did not inherit a powerful kingdom. He began as something far more dangerous, a man who understood people. Cao Cao entered a world where loyalty was fragile and survival depended on choosing the right allies. The Han government was losing control. Local commanders built private armies. Former allies turned against each other. Every province became a battlefield. In this world, hesitation meant death. At first, Cao Cao was only one commander among many. But unlike others who chased glory, he focused on something more important: control. He understood that armies alone could not rebuild China. A ruler needed food. A ruler needed loyal officials. And most importantly, a ruler needed legitimacy. Cao Cao's greatest opportunity came when the emperor himself became trapped by the chaos surrounding him. The young ruler had little real power. Powerful families fought over the imperial court. The capital was unstable, and Cao Cao made a move that would change everything. He brought the emperor under his protection. But protection came with a price. Cao Cao now controlled the symbol of the Han Dynasty itself. To his enemies, Cao Cao was a dangerous man who controlled a helpless emperor. To his supporters, he was the only leader capable of restoring order. History has argued over him for centuries. Was he a hero? Was he a tyrant? The answer depends on who tells the story. But one thing is certain: Cao Cao was changing the balance of power in China. But controlling the emperor was not enough. Cao Cao still had enemies. Powerful warlords across China refused to accept his authority. The greatest threat came from the north, a man commanding an army larger than anything Cao Cao had ever faced. His name was Yuan Shao, and soon, the fate of northern China would be decided on a battlefield called Guandu. Cao Cao had gained the emperor. He had built an army, but now he faced an enemy with overwhelming numbers. Against impossible odds, Cao Cao would have to prove whether he was truly a genius, or simply another warlord destined to fall. By the year 200 AD, China had become a battlefield of competing ambitions. In the north, two powerful warlords stood above all others. One was Yuan Shao, a nobleman with wealth, influence, and the largest army in China. The other was Cao Cao, a rising commander who controlled the Han Emperor but faced enemies on every side. Their conflict would decide who would dominate northern China. On paper, the outcome seemed obvious. Yuan Shao possessed a massive army. His soldiers outnumbered Cao Cao's forces several times over. He had powerful generals, enormous resources, and the confidence of a man who believed victory was already his. But wars are not won on paper. They are won by the decisions made when everything is at stake. When the two armies finally met at Guandu, Cao Cao did not rush forward. He understood something his enemies did not. A larger army requires more food, more supplies, more organization, and more time, if he could survive long enough. Yuan Shao's greatest strength could become his greatest weakness. For months, the armies fought without a decisive victory. Cao Cao's forces were under constant pressure. Supplies were running low. His soldiers were exhausted. Some advisors urged him to retreat, but Cao Cao waited. He was searching for one mistake, and eventually, Yuan Shao gave him one. Yuan Shao's army depended on a massive supply depot at Wuchao. Without food, his enormous army could not continue fighting. Cao Cao saw the opportunity. Instead of attacking the enemy's soldiers, he attacked what kept them alive. Under cover of darkness, Cao Cao launched a desperate raid against Yuan Shao's supplies. When the supplies burned, Yuan Shao's advantage disappeared. His army lost confidence. His commanders lost control. And the war that seemed impossible for Cao Cao to win suddenly turned in his favor. The Battle of Guandu became one of the greatest examples of strategy defeating strength. Cao Cao had not won because he had more soldiers. He won because he understood the battlefield better than anyone else. Cao Cao had defeated the strongest warlord in northern China. But controlling the north was not enough. Beyond the Yangtze River, two more powerful figures were rising. One was a man who dreamed of restoring the Han Dynasty. The other controlled the wealthy lands of the south. Soon, they would all collide. While Cao Cao's reputation was rising, another man was fighting a very different battle. He had no powerful family, no enormous army, no wealthy territory. By most measures, he should have disappeared into history. But Liu Bei possessed something that many powerful rulers lacked: the ability to inspire people. Liu Bei claimed descent from the Han royal family, but by the time he entered politics, that connection meant little. He was poor, he had no influence, and the collapsing empire gave him little opportunity. Yet when rebellion spread across China, Liu Bei saw a chance to protect the people and restore order. During these early years, Liu Bei met two men who would become legends beside him. One was Guan Yu, a warrior famous for his strength and loyalty. The other was Zhang Fei, a fierce fighter whose courage matched his enormous personality. Together, they formed a brotherhood that would become one of the most famous stories in Chinese history. What made Liu Bei different was not his victories. It was his ability to survive defeat. When other leaders lost battles, they lost followers. When Liu Bei lost battles, people followed him even further. They believed he was fighting for something greater than himself: the restoration of the Han Dynasty. But dreams alone could not defeat Cao Cao. Liu Bei needed more than courage. He needed land. He needed soldiers. And most importantly, he needed a strategist capable of seeing the future. Soon, Liu Bei would meet the man who would change his fate forever: a brilliant mind known as Zhuge Liang. Serving as Liu Bei's chief strategist, He played a crucial role in shaping the kingdom of Shu and became one of the most respected military and political minds in Chinese history. Zhuge Liang remains a symbol of wisdom and foresight. Cao Cao had power. Liu Bei had loyalty, but neither controlled the south. Across the Yangtze River, another family was building a kingdom of its own, and soon, three ambitions would move toward the same battlefield. While Cao Cao dominated the north, and Liu Bei struggled to survive, a third power was quietly growing along the Yangtze River. The south was different from the lands of the north. Its rivers were wider, its terrain was harder to conquer, and its people were protected by one of China's greatest natural defenses. The foundation of this southern power was built by the Sun family. Sun Jian was a talented military commander who earned respect during the chaos of the late Han Dynasty. His courage on the battlefield gave his family influence. But after his death, that responsibility passed to his eldest son, Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu was young, but he was brilliant. Through courage, diplomacy, and military skill, he captured territory across the south. His victories earned him a reputation as a rising star. But his greatest achievement was creating something that would outlive him, a foundation for his younger brother, Sun Quan. When Sun Tzu died unexpectedly, the future of the southern territories fell into the hands of his younger brother. Sun Quan was only 19 years old. Many questioned whether someone so young could lead. But Sun Quan understood something important. He did not need to be the greatest warrior. He needed to surround himself with the right people. Among those advisors were some of the most talented minds of the era. Men like Zhou Yu, a brilliant commander and naval strategist. Together, they transformed the South into a powerful force. They knew the Yangtze River was more than a river. It was a shield, and anyone who wanted to conquer the South would have to cross it. For years, the three powers have been growing separately. Cao Cao in north, Liu Bei searching for a future, Sun Quan defending the South. But soon, their paths would collide, and the greatest battle of the era was about to begin. Cao Cao had united the north. Sun Quan controlled the south. Liu Bei had finally found a place to stand. Now, all three would meet on the banks of the Yangtze River. The battle would decide the future of China. After defeating his rivals in the north, Cao Cao had achieved what many thought was impossible. He had built the strongest army in China. The emperor was under his control. His enemies were scattered. Only one obstacle remained: the Yangtze River. Beyond it waited the wealthy southern lands controlled by Sun Quan. Cao Cao believed the war could end with one final campaign. He gathered an army unlike anything the South had ever seen. Thousands of soldiers, hundreds of ships, a force so large that many believed resistance was impossible. But Cao Cao had overlooked one important detail. The South did not need to defeat him in strength. They only needed to survive him. Meanwhile, Liu Bei was once again facing disaster. His forces were small, his territory was limited, and Cao Cao's army was moving directly toward him. For Liu Bei, surrender would have been the easy choice. But surrender meant abandoning the dream he had spent his entire life protecting: the restoration of the Han Dynasty. There, Liu Bei met the man who would transform his future, Zhuge Liang, known as the Sleeping Dragon. He understood something others did not. Cao Cao was powerful because China was divided. But if the South united, even the greatest army could be stopped. Zhuge Liang convinced Liu Bei that survival depended on one thing: an alliance. Liu Bei and Sun Quan had different goals. One wanted to restore the Han. The other wanted to protect his homeland. But they shared the same enemy, Cao Cao. And sometimes, history is changed by enemies who decide to stand together. In late 208 AD, the two sides finally met near the Red Cliffs along the Yangtze River. Cao Cao had numbers. He had experience. He had confidence. But his army faced problems he could not easily solve. Many northern soldiers were unfamiliar with naval warfare. Disease spread through the crowded camps, and the river that had protected the south was now their battlefield. Cao Cao had crossed the river believing victory was inevitable. But the South had prepared a surprise, a plan that would turn the greatest army in China into a sea of flames. Cao Cao had built the greatest army China had ever seen. But numbers alone could not guarantee victory. His soldiers were far from home. They were facing an enemy that knew the rivers, the weather, and the land. And across the Yangtze, a smaller force was preparing a battle plan that would change history. The southern commanders knew they could not defeat Cao Cao in a direct battle. They needed strategy, they needed timing, and they needed the perfect opportunity. Their greatest weapon was not a sword. It was deception. The plan depended on one dangerous advantage: fire. The southern forces understood the river winds. They knew that at the right moment, flames could travel faster than any army. And when the wind finally changed, the trap was ready. Then the attack began. Southern ships moved through the darkness. Fire arrows filled the sky. Burning vessels crashed into Cao Cao's fleet. The flames spread from ship to ship. What had been Cao Cao's greatest advantage became his greatest weakness. Cao Cao survived the disaster, but the army that crossed the river with dreams of conquest was now broken. The South had achieved the impossible. A smaller alliance had defeated the strongest military power in China. Red Cliffs was not just a battle. It was the moment China's future changed forever. After Red Cliffs, China was no longer a struggle between one empire and its enemies. Three powers now stood apart. Cao Cao controlled the north. Sun Quan protected the south. Liu Bei finally had the chance to build something of his own. The Han Dynasty was still alive, but its future had already been decided. The age of the three kingdoms had begun. But creating a kingdom was only the beginning. Holding one together would prove even harder. Liu Bei would finally gain a homeland. Cao Cao would build a powerful state. And Sun Quan would defend a kingdom that would last for generations. The flames of Red Cliffs had faded, but the consequences would last for centuries. Cao Cao returned north defeated, but not destroyed. His power remained enormous. He controlled the richest lands in China. He commanded experienced generals, and he still held the influence of the Han court. A lost battle had slowed him, but it had not ended his ambition. In the south, Sun Quan had proven that his kingdom could survive. The victory at Red Cliffs protected his homeland, but survival was only the first step. He needed strong leaders. He needed loyal generals, and he needed time to transform a defensive alliance into a permanent power. Three leaders now stood at the center of history. Cao Cao, the man who believed China needed order. Liu Bei, the man who believed China needed restoration. Sun Quan, the man who believed his homeland needed protection. They had different dreams, but they all wanted the same thing: power over the future of China. The Han Dynasty had not officially fallen. The emperor still sat upon the throne, but everyone understood the truth. Real power no longer belonged to one ruler. It belonged to three kingdoms: Wei in the north, Shu in the west, Wu in the south. Their struggle would create heroes, betrayals, and legendary battles. The kingdoms had been born, but the story was far from over. Because kingdoms are not built only by victories. They are tested by time, and the greatest battles of the three kingdoms were still waiting. A reminder that history is not shaped only by those who hold power, but by those who dare to change the world around them. And that is why, after nearly 2,000 years, the story of the three kingdoms is still being told. Thank you for watching the video. Enjoy the rest of your day.